Hello everyone. Today we will talk about Paul Cézanne. An important Impressionist painter and considered a pioneer of modernism. Cézanne was one of the painters who opened up a new world of painting. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, his unique perspective and methods influenced many subsequent artists. And he is considered an important figure who laid the foundation for contemporary art. Let us begin our journey into the world of Cézanne. Cézanne was born in Aix-en-Provence in the south of France in 1839. To a wealthy banker father. He first enrolled in law school, but then headed to Paris to become a painter. At first he painted with thick paint, a strong touch, and dark tones. But working outdoors with Pissarro, he changed his style to incorporate impressionistic light and color. From the 1880s onward, he broke away from the Impressionist group and pursued his own style of painting, which concentrated the subject in its essential form. His use of small, repetitive brushstrokes and flat colors based on blues and grays were characteristic of his work, which had a profound influence on 20th-century art, especially Cubism. Paul Cézanne is supposedly one of the Impressionists. In fact, he worked with the Impressionists in Paris for a little over a decade. In particular, he worked closely with Camille Pissarro, and was influenced by him pictorially. However, when Impressionism gained public recognition in the 1880s, Cézanne left Paris and retreated to his hometown of Aix. One of Cézanne's major characteristics was his persistent and repetitive use of a single motif. He painted not only Mount Sainte-Victoire and the surrounding landscape, but also his wife. In this painting, Cézanne depicts his wife, Hortense Fiquet. Hortense met Cézanne around 1869. They had a son in 1872. This painting, one of more than 20 posed by Hortense, hangs in the greenhouse of Jas de Buffon, the Cézanne family residence near Aix. The unfinished canvases offer a glimpse into Cézanne's working methods. He placed the carefully modeled head of Madame Cézanne slightly off-center, hugging it between the lush trees and slender plants. Next, he built the rest of the pyramidal composition with a precise touch. Cézanne did not simply depict objects realistically, but rather to gain insight into the essential form and composition of the objects themselves. Cézanne's most powerful work, and the one that revolutionized the course of Western painting, was his painting of apples, which was full of surprises. Cézanne's painting of apples is not just a still life of fruit. To begin with, Cézanne did not like apples as food. For him, apples were the perfect material for trial and error when painting. Cézanne was the first master in the history of painting to depict fruits as living creatures. Cézanne once wrote to a friend, "With an apple I want to astonish Paris." Why did Cézanne repeatedly paint apples? The reason has to do with his childhood friend and novelist Émile Zola. Émile Zola was born in 1840, a year younger than Cézanne, and came to France as an immigrant when he was in middle school. Zola was bullied for being an immigrant. It was Cézanne who helped Zola at that time. Zola gave Cézanne an apple as a gift to thank him for saving her. The apple became a token of friendship between Cézanne and Zola. For this reason, Cézanne painted many paintings with apple motifs. It is a very heartwarming and wonderful episode. However, the two are forced to break off their relationship by one chance or another. There are various theories as to the reason for the breakup. But one theory is that Cézanne asked a friend to exhibit a work at the Salon, and Zola became angry when it was selected for the prize. The other is that Cézanne was furious that Zola's novel was modeled after his own. However, there is an episode in which Cézanne wept when Zola died. If it is true that he was in great admiration, would he weep when Zola died? The fact that Cézanne continued to paint many pictures with apple motifs seems to indicate that they did not really get along. Let me now introduce some of Cézanne's paintings of apples. Let's look at the work to see how Cézanne composed the screen. Looking at this painting, the space on the screen is distorted. The apples and oranges start to move on their own, and the flower pot seems to fall over. This is something that can only be established in the painting. And if you try to reproduce it in real life, It would be unnatural, as if it were to fall off the table. The apple on the left side of the table is depicted from a slightly elevated perspective, as if peering down from above. In this way, the artist did not paint the whole picture from a single point, as in conventional perspective, but composed the picture from a variety of perspectives. If he were to paint with an academic approach, he would have placed the table horizontally, and drawn the fruits and plates on the same plane according to their shapes. However, Cézanne radically overturned the traditional methods of perspective and depiction. Carefully observe the apples in Cézanne's paintings. The apples appear to be arranged haphazardly, but in fact they are arranged geometrically and in great detail. Furthermore, the color of each apple has been thoughtfully balanced. This shocked Georges Braque, and together with Picasso, he started Cubism, a technique of depicting objects from multiple perspectives. Picasso, a friend of Cézanne, once said, "Art is destructive in the first place." Cézanne tried to carefully express the sensations and emotions he experienced in reality. When he painted an apple, he went around it to look at it, touch it, and smell it. Then, in an attempt to capture everything about the apple, she placed the apple by the window of her studio and continued to observe the apple as it rotted. This is why the black stain of the apple is said to remain on the window sill of his studio. Incidentally, this painting is now in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. But it was once owned by Claude Monet. Cézanne was not as flamboyant as Monet or Renoir, and was virtually unknown, even after the age of 50. However, after a solo exhibition in Paris in 1995, many younger painters began to admire Cézanne, including Gauguin and Van Gogh, as well as Bonnard, Matisse, and Braque. Later, up-and-coming painters who were to create major movements in contemporary painting, such as post-impressionists, Les Nabis, Fauvists, and Cubists, all called Cézanne the perfect role model. If it were not for Cézanne, still life paintings would not have become popular among various artists. Still life has long been a minor subject matter. However, Cézanne showed once again the potential of still life painting, and painters began to paint still lifes with their own individuality. Matisse, for example, was the greatest painter of the 20th century. Looking again at Matisse's paintings, it is clear how much he was influenced by Cézanne. Cézanne's idea that to paint is to create a composition in a canvas continues to influence many artists even now, more than 100 years after his death. Cézanne found geometric discipline and consistency in nature, and tried to reconstruct it in his paintings. He was a pioneer among painters who expressed the art of concepts such as, "what I am thinking about now," by projecting his own thoughts and concepts into his paintings, rather than depicting them realistically. He quickly expanded the possibilities of what paintings could be and what they could do in the future. For this reason, Cézanne's apples attracted worldwide attention. It is for this reason that Cézanne, along with Manet, is praised as the «father of modern art». If you have the opportunity to come in contact with the actual Cézanne apple paintings, please take the time to view them carefully. Thank you very much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Well then, let's meet in the next video. See you again.